Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tayte for another entry in the David Fincher Retrospective. And this week, we are, of course, talking The Game, released in 1997, starring Michael Douglas, and a film that I don't know if it's ever been brought up on this channel before, which is going to make it interesting.
Yeah.
I would say the Fincher film that most people aren't aware of or haven't seen. One certainly is not spoken about a lot.
I think more people know Panic Room out of kind of. I know that we got Fight Club next, and then it's Panic Room. But I would say from this era of Fincher, more people know Panic Room or know of Panic Room than The Game. Even to myself, like I watched. I guess we'll go into memories in a minute, but I watched this reasonably recently for the first time. And I didn't realize it was a Fincher film until pretty much the end. And then I was like, oh, of course, it makes so much sense that it's a Fincher film. But no, this is like the one that kind of slides underneath everyone's radars. Like everyone talks about, your Sevens, your Fight Clubs, your Benjamin Buttons, your Social Networks. But, this one kind of gets lost in there. And I don't think many people know it actually exists.
Yeah, and I think it's one sort of, we'll get into it in a moment, again, our memories of it, but I think it's one that because it's in between Seven and Fight Club, it sort of is like the 90s is grouped and you got Alien for whatever reason, but everyone knows he did Alien 3, whether they like it or not. It's well known. You got Seven, you got Fight Club, and I think people sort of forget about The Game. And ironically, we'll talk about its development, but it wasn't development before Seven, which also caught me off guard. But
yeah,
as always, we want to hear from everybody at home. So please do comment with your thoughts on The Game. Are you a fan of this? Your thoughts on David Fincher? At the time of recording, I guess we can say this now. The first two episodes we recorded very early. Since recording those, we've now had we've had not just an incredible poster, we've had a trailer for The Killer. It's premiered at Venice, and we now know it's going to be at London Film Festival in October. So it is building quickly. We're going to work on our London Film Festival plans because we're still doing this retrospective in the order we're doing on the Mondays, with our big review for The Killer releasing on Monday, November the 13th. But we might try and do something festival-wise for it too. So any updates, we'll put in our social medias, and you can find us on linktree.com/cinemasavvy. So you've got a link to our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, all that stuff on there, and Redbubble, where you can pick up our merch if you'd like to. But as I said, do comment your thoughts on this film. Very curious to see what people think of this one, just because, again, no one really talks of it. But Tayte, as always, let's go for the IMDb plot synopsis, because we don't have a guest this week. We've got a lot lined up, but again, we're trying to spread them out as well. And recording wise as well, we've got to work for some varying deadlines too. But talk us through the plot synopsis, and then also if you want to go through the first time you watched it, I'll do mine after as well.
Yeah, sure. So after a wealthy San Francisco banker is given an opportunity to participate in a mysterious game, his life is turned upside down as he begins to question if it might really be a concealed conspiracy to destroy him. That's quite detailed to kind of give kind of what is the general plot to the film, and it doesn't really give away too many spoilers because a lot of this is very upfront in the film. It is a puzzle box kind of mystery drama, all based around kind of this one kind of man turning, was it 47, or how old is he meant to be in the film?
I can't remember.
Let me get this up. I can get this up real fast. On his birthday. No, I can't. Is it on the IMDb? But whatever.
It's Michael Douglas, though, isn't it? I mean,
it's Michael Douglas. 48th birthday. There we go. So it's meant to be a key birthday for him, which they kind of reveal in the film. We'll talk about that in a bit. But for it, he gets given the birthday present of being invited into this kind of secret society thing where it's meant to be a game. It's meant to be a bit of fun, but then it kind of slowly devolves into full-on conspiracy, full-on like every single person in the world. Are they an actor? Are they real? Kind of what is reality? What are the people controlling the game in control of? What is he in control of? He gets kind of put through hell because of it. My memories of this film, I watched this film for the first time last year, and it would have been either like October or November. So it wasn't too long ago that I watched this for the first time. I thought it was okay. It wasn't like immediately like it wasn't my favorite Fincher film to immediately go to. Certain parts of the film I liked, certain parts of the film I really didn't. It's really interesting because it seems like I have very similar opinions to Fincher in this one. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But But no, I think it's a very kind of middle of the road mystery drama film. And without kind of Fincher being kind of one of the best thriller directors of all time, it's quite a weak entry if you look at it from that perspective. But if you look at it from kind of the general thriller drama perspective, it's actually quite an engaging one. So it's really tough. You've got, if you're putting it up against all of Fincher's other films, it's not the best. Yeah. But if you're actually putting it in context of other thrillers, it's pretty good. So I guess that's why it kind of sits there.
Yeah, very well said there, because I'm sort of in the same boat as you, that in respect to, as you sort of said, for a Fincher film, it's not up to like his top tier stuff. It's certainly not Alien 3. But I'd say overall it's a very solid film. And honestly, kind of my thoughts.
Honestly, very quickly, I would rather watch Alien 3 again than watch this again sooner rather than later. But then again, I watched the correct cut of Alien.
You watched the assembly cut, yeah.
I watched the assembly cut.
The game's weird because I saw this the first time. I've said it every video, and I'm going to keep saying it for a few more weeks. But when I was studying film at A-level, again, we had like a module on Fincher, and I saw the game for the first time. The only time I'd seen it until this week, ready to rewatch this actually. And I loved it. And I think we saw this before Fight Club. I think when we were watching them at college, we were doing it in career order. So we did 7, the game, Fight Club, but then we did Zodiac. We didn't do Panic Room. And I love this film. And I think because as far as a thriller goes, it ticked everything. And I quite like the ambiguous films where I haven't particularly seen a film like this before, certainly at the time in 2012 now. That's scary. That's 11 years ago. Blimey. I am. Sorry, I'm just trying to get that image out of my head now. That was 11 years ago I started college. Bloody hell. I didn't see that many films like this, and there aren't many films like this to its credit, and I just never got around to seeing it again. I picked it up recently on Blu-ray before we started doing these, and I did rewatch it obviously for this, and I was quite excited. I was like, I've not seen the game since this time, and my second viewing of it wasn't anywhere near as much as I liked it when I was younger. And it's very strange, and I think maybe there's a sort of elusive message there that for a first-time viewing experience, without knowing what the story is, where the story is going, I'd never seen a trailer. The only image I'd seen was the DVD cover, which is, of course, the puzzle pieces and Michael Douglas. And yeah, the first viewing was really good. And again, it's held good memories in my mind. And the second one, I don't think it was a bad viewing, but it just wasn't the same. And I think I know where it was going. Before we hit live, I was sort of saying to you, like, I'd forgotten, like, the ending. I was like, wait, I don't remember the brother dying. And I straight into Wikipedia really stupid. I was like, oh, no, there's another like 5 minutes. But I was annoyed at myself for checking out Wikipedia, but also the fact I'd forgotten it completely, I guess isn't that great a sign. And I would say that, again, in the 11 years of stuff you could argue I've learned since, it hasn't held up as well as back then. I've got a lot of other Fincher films I prefer. But also, there's a lot of other thrillers I also prefer. So it's very weird because it's taking nothing away from, I guess, we'll get into direction shortly. It's nothing away from how it's directed. I just think there's something missing, which we'll get into. And kind of with this, always, we'll talk behind the scenes, and there isn't exactly a fair amount. This was in production many years before Fincher was involved. Jonathan Mostow, probably best known for directing Terminator 3, as in the actual Terminator 3, not the next Terminator film we keep saying is meant to be Terminator 3.
Yeah.
This was Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, which I think was 2001 time. So this is before then. He was attached to it, and Kyle can never pronounce it. Malakin is the one from 80s Dune.
McLaughlin.
There's a giant insect flying around my screen. And
Bridget
McLaughlin and Bridget Fonda. So these were attached. And at the time, Bridget Fonda was playing the role that would go to Sean Penn, which we'll get into because
that would have been interesting. Huh. Okay.
There's some big behind the scenes. But when it ends up going to Fincher, it's post Alien 3 now. So we're here post Alien 3. We're pre 7. But he has been working on 7. So he's met the writer Andrew Kevin Walker. And Andrew Kevin Walker, whilst working on 7 with Fincher, is also working on the game. And he brought him on board to basically make Nicholas, of course, Michael Douglas' character, far more cynical as a person. So this is probably a completely different draft. And whenever I think of films like this, again, it's not like I've read the screenplays. You probably aware of Jonathan Nolan / Spielberg's Interstellar, whereas obviously we end up with Christopher Nolan's Interstellar.
Yeah.
Similar concepts, but two completely different ones. One's more Journey to the Center of the Earth, the other's the one we got. And I'd imagine the game is fits into because it feels like a Fincher film because they've obviously made changes around when they've needed to make changes. And 7 ended up being made first. That was down to Brad Pitt freeing his schedule, doing all that stuff early. Because of 7's success, the budget went higher for this. They were able to do more, shoot it in a different style. So I quite like that.
I'd say straight away, that's where I think the first problem with this film comes in. I think this film would have done a lot better with a lower budget. Because the issue I have with this film, and I guess it's grounded in the story mainly, but this film kind of stays grounded within reality as far as conspiracy is concerned. For an awful lot of the film, it stays grounded. You could believe it because, it's not a magic trick. It's just people, moving out of places in the right time, things being planted and eyes watching. That's fine. But as you get further through the film, as the conspiracy gets bigger, it doesn't become, bigger because he finds more secrets and more kind of eyes watching. It's more like more people get involved and the stunts become bigger. And that takes away from the film. And I'm not a big fan of that. And that's kind of the first start-off point I guess I'd go with. Because as you get through the film, it becomes more exaggerated and more over the top. And I don't think it needed to be. I think it needed to be, instead of extroverted and kind of expanding out, it needed to be more introverted and looking inwards and kind of looking more into kind of his closer friends being part of the conspiracy instead of the entire world around him, because that would have made for better tension. And that's where this film lost me. And it lost me earlier on than it did the first time I was watching it. I'm in a similar boat with you. First time I watched it, I actually quite enjoyed it. The second time I enjoyed it a little bit less. It's still okay, but I was kind of lost a lot earlier on the second time because it's like, oh, that's too big. We don't need that kind of thing. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I'm glad you said it that way because there is something missing, and certainly the way the introvert-extrovert thing makes sense because inherently it's a personal. The idea of the story is basically like value like your living life. That it's kind of that's simmered down as an understatement. And there's probably much better ways to do it, but you are right. It goes from elaborate joke to oh god, there's like rapey stuff going on now. Oh god, there's now guns and blanks and this and this and this, and I'm like. It's certainly ballooning, and it's kind of making me go back to 7, where it's like, that like scene in the middle when the music kicked in, you've got like the armed police going after everyone. It gets big, and it's like almost the way we explained it was like a critique on the crime genre, where it all goes guns blazing for the military, and it's the complete opposite. That's how I kind of felt this was going, but it suddenly just balloons, and I wouldn't say it lost me on the final act, but now you've pointed out it's hard to ignore it. I think my issue is the actual ending itself of the way it's the let's fake the brother's suicide. Let's I hate this sort of criticism.
But that's
how did they know he was
going
to jump off the roof of the building? Yeah, and if it had been simmered down, and again, it's hard to not think about 7 because this is a Fincher series. It's the film I did before. What's the ending of 7? It's 3 people standing in the middle of nowhere. It's as low. It's almost the smallest sequence of the entire film, not including the head and the delivery box.
This film would have done better if it ended with having thought that he'd killed his brother. His brother kind of pulls him back from the ledge and gives him a hug. That would have maybe been.
I think the whole shooting the brother. It just and given my thoughts on maybe jumping ahead, but. I don't think the brother's in it enough to care. We get 3 scenes with Sean Penn in this film. We get him at the diner at the opening, which is fine. We get the breakdown in the middle, and then we get the ending, and it feels somewhat forced. And I think kind of even talking about it, so we talk about the direction because we've sort of gone from the budget. We can talk the direction, and I don't mind saying this. Fincher said on record in the years that have followed the film that he's not proud of the third act, and I think that's the key here is. It's such a good concept, and it's been done to death. The businessman that's got it all, but actually he's got nothing. And it's the whole it's like Scrooge, isn't it? I think that's one of the reference points for how they approach this film as well. But it's a tried and tested film, but this is done in a really unique, different way. And I just think there's something about original films for me where I'm always going to be calmer on them. It's a terrible comparison, but a fair one. The film that came out last year, Don't Worry Darling, directed by Olivia Wilde, starring Florence Pugh, of course, and Harry Styles after all the aggro that happened. I didn't mind the concept of the film. I think it had a very poor ending, and it didn't work. But it was an original film, and I like Olivia Wilde as a director, so I kind of, not give him the benefit of the doubt, but it's like I'd rather have a flawed final act in something different, something original that's out there trying to be something else, rather than this is the 8th entry in this series doing this safe ending. So, and I kind of have that with the game, that I appreciate Fincher doesn't like the ending years have followed. Maybe he's thought over the years he could have done it differently, blah, 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 that kind of thing. # don't release director's cut. But it's one of those where I'll give them credit because I can see what they were trying to do. And I think for me, something so minor. I mean, the businessman, the bit that sort of sums up for me is at the party. The guy he sacks towards the opening of the film, that his father is like, "Oh, you sacked me. It was the best thing that ever happened to me." I've happened. I was like, I kind of get that, but I don't mean it sound like cinema sins, but it just feels too easy. Like everything happened really, really good because of this thing, and I just think I'm lost somewhat in there. That you could have still had that ending, still had the lessons to learn from it, but I just think it goes past the point of cruelty. Then everything's fine. Shake hands, have a laugh about it at the end.
I'd pin this film somewhere between A Christmas Carol and The Adjustment Bureau.
Never seen Adjustment Bureau. Sorry, I know it's Matt Damon.
It's a Philip K. Dick novel, so similar to Minority Report turned into a film, and that's all about conspiracy. That's all about all of those different things. And then I'd say in the same kind of sense, it's like A Christmas Carol because it's like, it's the redemption arc. It's the kind of, you must go through all this torturous kind of things. You must kind of, repent in these various different ways. You must look to your past. You must look to your future kind of thing to be able to kind of, accept your life as it is and stuff like that. And that's kind of epitomized by, and we were having a discussion about this beforehand, the Succession opening to the film. Yeah. We're going, Joe, I can't believe we're doing this. We're going straight into our favorite scenes. This is my favorite scene right here, but it's not because of the film, and that's really bad. It is Succession, and I'm sure that the writers of Succession would have looked at this and gone, "Yeah, let's do that."
Oh yeah, they must. There's no way this went through the entirety of the HBO and no one saying, "Hey, isn't that from?" I mean, maybe they've forgotten the game, but it's one of them. I mean, I've technically forgotten it, I guess, by the time I started watching Succession. But Fincher's always been amazing at intro sequences. We spoke about it with Alien 3. I think I put it as my favorite scene in the film. 7, disgusting, incredible opening sequence. A lot of his other... We're going to talk about Fight Club next week, which has got ridiculous opening as well. His title sequences, there's a lost art to it, and I say this a lot, and it always frustrates me. Obviously, the Bond films, sometimes they get them well, sometimes they don't. But not enough films do them these days, and the games one's fantastic. And I guess the issue now is that it's going to forever now be synced to Succession. That
100%.
I do want to do some digging after on like his Jesse Armstrong ever spoke about it. They must have known this. Even the sepia filters, the 35mm film stock footage, that the dad, the absent children, the distant children, absent children. It's Succession, and it's really hard not to think of that. So I guess the game will stick in the memory now. But also the fact it's called The Game is equally a struggle because I just think of Triple H's entrance.
Well, here we go. You ready for this? Straight away, just typed it in. The opening credits to Succession were inspired by those to David Fincher's thriller, The Game. Straight away.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's a great opening title sequence. We just give it to them. But aside from another classic Fincher thing, I kind of wanted to get your thought on the direction because.
Yeah.
The one thing we know with Fincher is that he strives for perfection in almost everything he does. There are countless stories of actors struggling on set. He'll have the same takes done 40, 50 times. The most famous one's actually in Gone Girl, which we'll talk about in a couple of months. But it's one of those where I watched this film, and although we've sort of criticized, I guess, the final act, the writing, the actual presentation, I hate this just grouping cinematographers together, but the way he shoots his films, the way he brings in his direction of photography, it never feels like there's another DP on a Fincher film. You think it's the same group, but it's not. It differs every time. There's another new DP for this one, and I just thought it was really interesting that it once again feels like a complete film. I can't look at this and say he's got to work on how he frames that image. He's got to work on this. He's got to work on that. The camera work, the fluidity of the editing, everything's on point. And I guess, although it's only his third film, because he'd done music videos for a long time before, he's still doing music videos at this point, actually. And he'd worked with the biggest names in music, Michael Jackson at the time, Madonna, and a few others that escape my mind. A couple of, I think Wham, he did a few things for. It's one of those where the pressure of doing a music video for someone like that is probably going to be very different to when you're calling the shots and you're in charge against other actors. And I just think it's really impressive how in so many of his films, and this as well, I think Michael Douglas is superb in this, sort of vaguely segueing into the cast, but I can't sit here and fault the casting. I can't fault the performances. He always gets the best out of the actors. I think my comprehensive issue is the final act of this film. But again, I love the idea he's presenting, and he's so good at going into the mind and that sort of psychology. I don't know if there's like a term for it within film, but it's not a psychological horror at all, but it is a psychological thriller. And I think it's not easy to make this kind of films because you got to get everyone on board, and to go from Seven to this to then do Fight Club, I think it's three completely different films. But this one, it feels like a natural follow-up to Seven. Like, you're not going to do another crime murder film.
No.
So how do you then approach something different? And I think, late 90s to Michael Douglas, so I'm not saying a lot of his films, but this is obviously after he's done Wall Street. This is after, oh God, I forgot the one. Is it the early 90s one, the famous scene at the fast food place, turning down and burning down something, I can't remember.
Falling Down.
Falling Down, that's the one. I love Michael Douglas in this, and it's more surprising that I don't think Michael Douglas has been in another Fincher film since. I know he doesn't repeat his leads often, but I can't really fault the direction. I know it's a really bland way
it's
to
a
talk
fair
about it
point.
on the Fincher retrospective.
No, it's a fair point. It definitely feels like a Fincher film. The only thing I would say is, and this kind of comes down to the inherent kind of goofiness that the film follows, and kind of the film works best in the earlier scenes where it's set within reality. The second it jumps out of reality and the second it becomes a little bit silly, and like you said, it balloons up, that's where it loses its edge. And the thing with Fincher films is every single one of them keeps you on edge. Maybe not Benjamin Button, but all of his films, all of his thrillers at least, keep you on the edge of your seat. And this one had me on the edge of my seat for the opening half, but then as it comes towards the end, I don't know, maybe it's the happy ending. Maybe this film didn't deserve a happy ending. Maybe it was the kind of the ballooning of the situation, stuff like that. But the film loses its edge. I don't really know how to describe it. It's not kind of dark and dingy. It's a bit more kind of like
safe.
Oh, how's he going to get out of this one kind of thing, instead of, oh, he's not getting out of this one. And then he does like, wow, okay, that was close.
Does it make it harder post Seven, knowing how Seven ends, which is the complete opposite of how any? I mean, if you really boil down the history of the industry, Seven's probably one of the darkest endings ever to a film.
Oh yeah,
especially like without even getting into part 2 territories where cliffhangers. Like Seven is the definitive. You have failed. He has won. And part of me sits to think, saying, "Oh, there was a darker version. I know they shot another ending." With him on the rooftop.
You could still have him triumph at the end of this film, but it needs to have that bite to it, which I don't think he was able to get. And I'm not faulting Michael Douglas at all. I could be faulting Sean Penn here for being a bit too kind of comic as a character within this film, like overreacting to almost every single scene, overacting in almost every single scene. But something about this film just doesn't quite sit with me. And I don't know, I can't pin it down to direction, but it might be to do with, the direction given to the actors. It could be the story. It's something just doesn't settle right, especially with a film that, it's a Fincher film, it's going to be tense, but this film doesn't feel tense at all. Like there's just no tension there for a thriller. It just kind of plunders
Was
along.
your second viewing not tougher, but was your second viewing sort of dampen the film somewhat? Because it can happen. The amount of films I've seen where I've loved it the first time, and the second time around, I've just sort of dropped the barrel saying, wait, this is that film I thought about this. And again, it's impossible and unfair to compare to something like Seven, but every time I watch Seven, I'm like, wow. And the effect has not worn off of that first viewing. Whereas with this one, it just felt, it just fizzled out for me. Like, okay, I'm going to watch Fight Club next, so I'm excited for that film that gets better on every viewing I've ever seen. And I don't know if that's going to. I mean, we'll talk characters. So we spoke about the story, and the characters sort of are the story. Let's talk Michael Douglas. So playing Nicholas Van Orton. I loved him in this. I think he's great. Again, I've not seen enough Michael Douglas films to know how out of character this is. I don't want to be the guy that says I've only seen him in Marvel stuff. It's not just Marvel stuff, but unfortunately, a lot of it has been. And also going around San Francisco, just like Ant-Man, was also really hard to not think about Marvel again with Michael Douglas. And the fact that he hasn't aged.
It's set in San Francisco. You wouldn't know it watching this film. They don't have
exactly. It's all shot, and this was it. It was a tough shoot. They shot this on nights on location. It wasn't a day to night shoot. It was all nights, a lot of weekends. It was a very, very long filming schedule. And that's that Fincher style again, where you're going to do a night scene, we're going to shoot it at night. And that is how he operates. That's how he does it. And I do give him credit for that. It's a lot tougher on the actors. Doing night shoots, prolonged night shoots is probably the better term than just doing like a random one here and there. But the performance of Michael Douglas, I think, solid. But again, you kind of know what you're going to get with Michael Douglas, that he's an elite actor and he's going to be able to play this type of character. Sorry, that thing's flying around again. But I was just kind of curious, like, have you seen many of his films? I've not seen that many, but I don't want to sit here and disrespect him and say he plays the same character over, because that's ridiculously unfair. But there's a sort of, the way I have is that Michael Douglas is esteemed in the sense that what role you want to give Michael Douglas. You know how he can present himself on screen, and post Wall Street kind of makes sense. He's playing, once again, a very wealthy upper class person having his life sort of torn down in front of him. Michael Douglas can do that. We know he can do that, and that's what they're going to get out of him. So I've got no issue with the casting. I like him in the lead. And I don't really have anything else to say on him. That's really unfair.
I mean, for a person who's had such a long career, he hasn't actually been in that much stuff, which is interesting. I mean, 64 roles across his career, you go, oh, wow, that's a lot. But then you look at other actors who have had a lot shorter careers, who have had more acting roles over that time. He tends to play quite a straight kind of, non-comedic kind of your average guy character, maybe with a bit of upper class kind of thrown in as well. I always imagine him to be kind of sat down in a big chair drinking a glass of whiskey. As that kind of role and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I enjoyed his performance in this film. I'm glad that they made his character a little bit more jaded and a little bit more kind of, cynical, as they put it as a word, because I don't think we could have dealt with a character who we didn't at least dislike a little bit of him, or at least the lifestyle he lived. Otherwise, there would be no lesson learned for the character. We wouldn't be able to empathize with it, at all. So I'm happy that, there were a few little character traits thrown in. I think the one that got me the most was the shoes. Kind of like he has too much money to even care. He loses one of his shoes, and what's her face, the character? Christine turns around to him and says that, how much was that? How much was that? He's like, oh, that was 1,000. He's like, 1,000 for a pair of shoes. He's like, no, for just that one shoe. It's just like, oh, kind of that's the life he's living. And that kind of seals in the character right there. Rich and, could buy anything in the world and doesn't really care enough about his own life, just lives in luxury and doesn't, appreciate what people have to go through. And his character gets put through absolute hell in this film. Like, his character, gets buried alive, kind of almost gets drowned. Gets beaten up. Like, there's so many different things this character goes through. The mental torture of having literally everyone in the entire city almost being against you. So he does go through a lot, and I think he does change as a character throughout the film. Even at the ending of him almost mimicking his father's death and having those succession kind of cards come back towards the end, really kind of, I like that kind of stylistic choice with the editing and stuff like that. But that kind of epitomizes the character. He's gone round in the cycle, but maybe at the end he's changed. Maybe at the end he's different. So I really enjoyed that performance.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you can see of this. And there's certainly the very light bits of humor you do get. I don't want to bring up Christopher Nolan, but it's that certain directors who don't do comedy can put very funny lines of dialogue in there, and it's normally from that sort of wicked sense. And it's an easy comparison to Dark Knight because it's again that wealthy billionaire status, but that shoe was 1,000. Those sorts of lines that I always do find amusing, and they tend to work. But yeah, with Michael Douglas is great, and kind of we'll talk the role of Conrad played by Sean Penn. I mentioned he's in for 3 scenes. The behind the scenes to this is insane. So Jodie Foster was on board to play this character. She was gonna be.
She ended up working with Fincher in the end, so And
also, I believe her studio or someone she's involved in helped produce this film. She originally it was going to be the daughter, and Michael Douglas was against it. He said there was only an 18-year age gap between them, and I believe he'd played a guardian in a film of hers already. So Fincher agreed as well, and Jodie Foster was out of the picture. This is where it gets interesting. Jodie Foster then sues the production $55 million. And it's settled outside privately. And there's no details beyond that point. But as you said, she ends up in panic room. So I'm going to guess that there was some agreements made there. But I just thought it was very interesting. After it went to Jodie Foster, Jeff Bridges offered it, and he then declined it. And then it did go to Sean Penn. But I just thought, I've never really seen a story like that, like getting sued for not being cast. And I think it was her own shooting schedule as well that also made it didn't work. Whether she was thinking the film would go on hold, I do not know. But it's a really interesting one. And maybe there'll be some more stuff when we're doing a bit of research for Panic Room. But it went to Sean Penn. Now, I've not seen many Sean Penn films as well. I did watch for the first time a few weeks ago Carlito's Way, where he wears a terrible, terrible wig. And obviously we know what he's about these days. But I'll be honest, I didn't care for the characters. I kind of said he's in it for 3 scenes. Once you know what happens, it isn't really, how would you say it? I think Dead Man Walking had come out at this point. But he's in 3 scenes, so it's hard to gravitate towards him. The first scene, he's that sort of jerk, charismatic younger brother, which is fine. You see that in films a lot. And then I feel empathy for him when he has been shot and you realize he's going to lose a brother. And then it's like, oh, he's alive.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. He's alive. Great. Looks pretty realistic, though. Very realistic. I liked the scenes we got of him. I just think there wasn't enough of him to warrant caring. Maybe 2 scenes more. I don't know. But I just maybe it worked in the concept that I felt when he died.
Yeah. They bicker and argue in every scene they're in together, so you don't get that love and affection. And even if there was 1 or 2 more scenes of them bickering, if he then turned around and actually showed empathy for his brother, I could believe that. But you're right, it does need more.
A bit like how the brothers are in Succession.
Exactly.
When they're arguing, you believe it, but you see the real side to them.
Exactly. But no, it just felt a bit, the arguments came very short-fused and short-sighted, and I guess it's because Sean Penn in the film is acting the entire way. But at the same time, bit of a nothing character for me. Could have been a lot more. And maybe with the previous kind of people they had in mind for the role, maybe it would have been a bigger role. Maybe it would have been a, bigger kind of point made, especially if it was his daughter putting him through this and kind of saying, come on, Dad, this is, you're wasting away your life. Kind of, you've told me the stories about your dad. You're going in the same way. It feels the same kind of thing. So would have been interesting at least.
Yeah, exactly.
And then on top of that, you could have had the parallels with the character of Christine, because that would have been really good to have kind of him go with a younger person, or even someone out of relationship kind of standard, like, you know, someone who he could interact with and have that kind of relationship stabilized with. That would have been really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Christine. Let's talk Christine as well.
Yeah.
Because, well, sorry, last thing I'll say, that the father-daughter bond would work in a different version of this film. And as I said, it clearly was in the other versions. But we sort of get the intro of Christine instead. I believe is a waitress played by Deborah Kara. I've actually seen her in many things. And I think Crash is probably the most famous thing she's been in, which was just before or came out at a similar time. I've never seen it.
I mean, the most she's nowadays she's in films that are getting like 3 stars on IMDb, or she is doing voices for Star Wars video games. A lot of Old Republic stuff. She plays the voice of Scorpio in a lot of the Old Republic games.
No idea who that is. That's for Phil to answer, not me.
There we go.
But Christine, this is a weird character. I loved the idea of the waitress accidentally caught, paid off to do this thing to sort of ruin it for him. And I'm kind of jumping back to what you said at the start of the video. Once it starts sort of extroverting outwards, once it's a conspiracy, once she's involved, she's an employee, she's there right to the very end. I don't really care for her.
No.
Had she have just been, I don't mean it's like a damsel in distress comparison, but I think what I'd have liked more is, and again, I don't like doing reviews where it's me saying do this, do that, because that's not how I like critique is. But I think her character wears off once you sort of lose the innocence from her. That had this been a character on the, I don't say on the adventure, I guess, like deep into the game, if she's like an unfortunate, how would you say it?
If she was not part of the game and just kind of caught up into it instead of being on the inside,
and she's been brought into it,
then you would have the film The Adjustment Bureau right there.
But if she was into it as well, through his own fault of him dragging her into it by costing her job in the very first place, I like that that's going to play that guilt card longer on him. And I just think there's different ways they could have tapped into all this. But the moment, again, the guns start coming out, the big action set pieces happen, I'm off to Australia. I just don't sort of care for the character. And I also think, why would Michael Douglas like want to hang out and stuff? Like, she was nice with him and things, but
she was nice with him, but she also
this person is almost
this
person could have killed him. He's going to jump off a building from it. And I think that's just where my head just sort of jumps out of the game, no pun intended, where it's just sort of there. And again, I don't think it's a bad performance by any means. I think it is that final act. The final act of how it's written. I'm not going to fault her performance. She's got great chemistry, Michael Douglas, very believable. And when she does have other scenes when she's dragged into it, I like what she does. And then again, Fincher always gets the best out of his actors. But I just think it's just not the. It's a struggle.
Close.
That final act is really a struggle, isn't it?
It is. It really is. It's
do you have anything else to say on it? I feel really bad.
Not really. I mean, we're criticizing this film a lot, and that's because it is so close to being very, very, very good. But a few creative decisions don't quite, get you there. As far as acting's concerned, the performances are okay. Michael Douglas steals it. I mean, he should do. He's the lead character, but there's nothing else really to talk about from that. I mean, this is a very story-heavy film. Once you figure out the story, it's got nothing left to, rely on. There's not much tension that builds within the film because you never truly feel like the character's in peril. Like, even to the end. And I guess, happy ending or not, on rewatch, when you watch Fincher's other films, you feel that tension running all the way through. With this film, I felt a bit of tension the first round. I felt nothing this time around. Absolutely nothing. Not a single scene where I thought, oh, peril, danger, kind of how to get out of this one. It's all very fluid. There's no kind of sharp edges there to catch yourself on. So, that's kind of where the film falls down and smashes through a window and lands on a giant air mattress or whatever.
Yeah, does the mattress have a cross on it as well? Well, like they know
it's a landing zone.
Where in there.
Yeah, it's a landing zone. Even though I just want to point out, if he jumps off the top of a building, and lands on safety glass, yeah, that's still gonna kill him. Like that's not a, oh yeah, it's nice and safe, oh, let's just brush out your eyes kind of thing. He fell a long way. You can see those support structures and beams that are keeping that safety glass in. He's still gonna hurt himself badly. If he's not dead, he is like severely injured from that. That's madness. Like, come on.
Yeah, and kind of with that, I kind of want to add, do you have anything on the score? Because the only time I've really felt as Howard
The
Shore
opening?
composing.
Yeah.
He'd worked on Seven. I think he worked with Fincher on Panic Room. I'm not sure what else past that, but it's one of those where, again, the opening's got a great. I think the ending when he's falling in the slow-mo, you need good music, but I think for Howard Shore's quality, it's not at the level we know of Howard Shore. But at the same time, for a film like this, you don't need a blaring soundtrack. You need the atmospheric music, and sometimes it's not noticeable on these sorts of films. So I don't have much to say on the score, but yeah, you mentioned the opening. The problem with the opening is we're going to just say the obvious, aren't we?
Yeah, it's
Succession.
It's Succession,
It's no one else's fault.
This inspired Succession, and you can't get away from that. And Succession has become bigger than this film. It will forever be bigger than this film, so it's always going to be tied into that. But realistically, the score only really hits in this film when he has flashbacks to his father standing on the roof or abandoning him at the doorstep. And that's kind of where the tie comes in. That's the only parts of the film where I really noticed the score massively, which are great scenes, great editing thrown in. I wish they lent into the dad angle more. They mentioned kind of like one line that it's, his birthday was the same age his dad committed suicide. And then past that, we just get the flickers of the flashback. I would have wanted that to be fleshed out more. And I guess, once again, if it was his daughter, that would have been the dynamic that would have been registered. I feel like maybe there's, too many conflicting things in this film that just didn't quite gel together. And maybe from one version of the script it did, but they just didn't go that route in the end based on what actors they could get and what actors they couldn't. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say on the score. Should we go into the impact?
Yeah, I mean, as we always do, we'll talk what happened. This was released in 1997. Grossed 109 mil at the box office off a 70 mil budget, which is quite a lot for the 90s.
Yeah.
It's a high budget. The numbers are, it's not a wow factor. Seven, we know, made it, I think, I can't remember, about 350 mil when we spoke about it. Yeah. So it's a lot less than then. And it didn't get any Oscar nominations. The first Fincher film so far not to get any. We always talk about Oscars on this. It's part of some of these directors where we talk about their sort of their history and whatnot. So there's not too much in either of those things. But we always go to that question: how is it perceived? We've spoken about Fincher. He's not ever disowned it at all. It's not an Alien 3 at all in the slightest. I think when you look, as you said earlier, you look at his filmography, you look at everything he's worked on since. I'm not being horrible and saying, I'm not saying it sits at the bottom either. That's really unfair. It's not by that. I think he's set such an incredible standard over the last sort of 25, 30 years that this is very, very much. I'm going to compare this to Insomnia, the Nolan film. I know it's a bit different because that's a reboot, but it's like early on in his career. It's between the breakthrough films. It's got a pretty good cast, and it's got all the signs. It's got the competency of the direction. But I always felt like there was something missing with Insomnia, and plus the director then goes on to do a lot better. And I think Fincher's in that same boat. He's done better since. Technically, I'd say one before, like Memento. But there's something missing. However, that being said, Michael Douglas loves the film. And he says it's a film that a lot of people speak to him about when they talk about the films they enjoy of his, which I really respect as well. Whether he's saying that's, of course, one thing, who knows? But I can't imagine him having too many people coming up to Michael Douglas and saying, I loved Ant-Man. I love Ant-Man, but I wouldn't, if I met Michael Douglas, I wouldn't be talking about Ant-Man. But yeah, and we always end on this. Have our opinions changed over time? I think me and you are both in that same boat, right? We've both done this twice now. Both our viewings, not back to back, distance between them both. And I say the second viewing hasn't cemented it. If the second viewing had sort of done it right, I'd be like, wow, like no one's talking about this film. And I then go to the question: its Letterboxd scores pretty solid. You know, it's got a lot of average 4-star on Letterboxd. As I said, from a technical standpoint, I'm not faulting it much. It's just that final act, and to me, you lose the wow factor. And segueing that before I get to final thoughts, we always talk about favorite scene. I know you mentioned earlier the intro titles. I'm gonna be honest; it's a struggle for me to not look. I'm gonna look past that because of Succession. It's hard not to.
But even if you look past Succession, it is the emotional heartbeat of the film, and it's at the start of the film. So that's
and it's
really
tailored that you think of the big moments. It goes back to the beginning, and
clearly,
I'd say I like the ending until they're all alive and they're all fine.
I just want to point out, creators of Succession have gone and watched this film and used it as inspiration from the title sequence, but maybe that's because it was the emotional heartbeat to this film. They wouldn't just watch the title sequence and go, "Oh, that's a cool title sequence." They would have gone, "Oh, that's the effect they use in this film," to link back to his father and stuff like that. And from there, they've maybe gone, "Okay."
Imagine remaking the game. It's like Jeremy Strong, it's Michael Douglas in this, the billionaire that's got it all that has nothing.
Yeah. And then having Roman setting up the game, that would be sick and twisted and hilarious.
In character.
Yeah, very in character.
Bring in Shiv, working for him. It's all part of the plan.
Yeah.
There's the remake. It's going to call it the plan. But, I mean, do you have any other favorite scenes than the title sequence?
It's really
like
difficult.
Neon Alien 3, isn't it?
It's really difficult. No, I could have picked one or two scenes from Alien 3 from this film. I guess I quite liked, and maybe it's just a scene of him acting, but the desperation in his acting and in his character when he's having to beg and buy his way back to America. That's a low point in the film, and I think he acted that very well, Michael Douglas. Very believable to a person who, and it's the scene where he gives away his watch as well. And you know how much that means to him, being the kind of the last thing that his father gave to him, to the point where, and he probably never got that back. He definitely never got that back, but at least he let go of the past at that point, and then the ending ruined it because he didn't let go of his past. He just repeated his history from his family. But those scenes are notable, at least.
Yeah, that's very fair. And kind of final thoughts on this film for me. I think it's fine. I mean, if you watch this, you've seen the film. So my posed question to everybody is, what's the second viewing like for you? Do you like this? I'm not even jumping to the comment section, but I actually want to know from people, like, what is the second viewing like? Because I would 100% recommend this to someone that's looking for a psychological thriller, that's just looking for something a bit different to watch. If they have not seen this film, I will recommend this film. But I'd actually never recommend someone to not say not watch it again. I might watch this again one day. I couldn't tell you when. I won't be in a rush to do it. But it's certainly a film where the second viewing has dampened it somewhat. Maybe the third viewing could work down the line. I don't know. But I'm in a weird state with it because, again, I think it's very competently directed. I'm just not with the finale, and it's lost me. And the more we spoke about it, the more I've discussed it. That's actually sometimes, we approach a film I don't like, and the more we talk about it, the more I actually start to respect and really enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this has done the opposite, but it's kind of been in that sort of, I wouldn't even say we're really taking it apart, but we're just diving into it a bit more, and it's sort of noticeable flaws are jumping out more than they did. And the things I really enjoyed from the film, I'm struggling to isolate away from watching it for the first time in complete, ambivalence to knowing what's going to happen in the next 20 minutes. So it's a weird one for me. It's a weird one.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's also a weird one. I want to say it's a decent entry-level thriller. For those who aren't, if you don't want to go straight into the brutal reality of a film like Seven or Zodiac, where they kind of really delve into that crime thriller kind of thing, this is more of an entry-level thriller. This is one that, if you've never properly got into the thriller genre before, this would be a nice opener. One that kind of has an upbeat ending, but one that takes you on a journey. And you definitely go on a journey with the character of Nicholas in this film. And you can't kind of take that away from him and deny kind of the fact that this film was well directed, it was well acted in there certain scenes. I just think that things didn't quite gel together somewhere. And I think there's a better script in there somewhere for this film as well, where they take, that different angle with the kind of father-son, I guess, father-daughter relationships. But, with the film that we were given, it's decent. It's definitely not one of Fincher's best. It's, like I said at the start, it's a good thriller, but it's not particularly a good Fincher film.
It's fair. It's fair. And that's going to round out this review today. So, as always, people comment your thoughts. You agree with this, you disagree with this, maybe you're a big fan of the game. I want to know your thoughts. I want to know your thoughts on this, and we will reply to any comments that do pop up whilst this video is on the channel. I say whilst, it's going to be on the channel moving forward. And it's a bit different, isn't it? And as always, get us on social media. Linktree.com/cinemasavvy. It's got all of the sites we use on there, so you can find that sort of stuff out. And we kind of mentioned a lot. We spoke about Panic Room a lot. It's not his next film. Panic Room is coming in 2 weeks' time, because next week we're going to have our review of Fight Club up. Cannot wait to revisit that. Then we've got Panic Room, Zodiac, and Benjamin Button has made the board.
So Benjamin Button, in my head, I was going to say, in my head, Benjamin Button's so far down the line. How on earth is that on the board there? We're going from the 90s all the way through to like 2008 in one sweep. Crazy.
I think it's one of those directors where Fincher really only makes film, not makes films when he wants to make films, but he's a perfectionist, right? So it's going to take longer in between releases. And I guess, once we get to the late 10s, it is that, because we know he's doing Mindhunter, because we know he's done House of Cards. So there's way less films, I guess, to where we are heading into The Killer. But it's going to be exciting watching them all. And we will have some other guests coming on those as well. So do stick around for who we announced and who we are bringing on for those. That being said, there's a lot of other things happening on the channel. We've mentioned London Film Festival. We're deep into planning on that. We've got Ahsoka videos every Wednesday. We've got new releases happening finally with cinemas. So there's going to be some more videos out on the channel, and we'll announce those on our social media. But in the meantime, comment your thoughts, and thank you all for watching, subscribing. I've said the outro the wrong around. I don't know why. But that's going to do it for this one. So take care, and we'll see you all on the next one.